Hello, in today's video we will be talking about some controls in C#. We have introduced some of the controls in prior videos, but today we will be talking about checkboxes, radio buttons, and group boxes. Going back to our game rental application, we're going to see how we can add a few controls to make the GUI look a little bit better. So the first thing we will be adding is a group box. And what a group box does is grouping the similar controls together, which makes our application look and feel a little bit better. So this is how we do it. We drag and drop the group box into our form, and then we drag our controls inside the group box. We can move the group box using this button right here. Let's do that again. Since we're missing a few buttons, let's do it a few controls at a time. So we'll put in our labels, and adding a group box does not change anything to your controls. But you need to make sure that you're dragging and dropping all of those controls inside your group box like this. You can increase the size of your group box to hold all the controls that you need it to hold. Then you need to change the name of your group box, and usually that should be a name that makes sense. So whatever you're grouping together, that would reflect on the name of the group box. So here, this is our general information, so we'll call it general group box. So this is the general information about our game rental. And we can also change the text of our group box. We'll call it general. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. Now what we can add is a few shipping options. So we can drag in another group box to hold our shipping options. And in there, instead of using a single label, we can add in a few options. So this is what we can do. We can add in radio buttons, and that would give the user a few options as to which shipping option they would like to use. And the price of each option will reflect on the total price. So we can select something very basic. So we can have priority shipping. We'll change the name of the radio button since we're going to be using it in the background code. And the use of radio buttons is really helpful when it comes to applications like this, because it minimizes the user input, which is one, very handy, and two, it minimizes user error. So it's always a good idea to use radio buttons and checkboxes whenever you can. For this one, we will use the overnight shipping option. So we just changed the name of the radio button. We'll add in the text. We can also add in another radio button to include our standard shipping. We might want to move the standard one up top just to keep it meaningful, since the standard shipping would be a little bit less expensive than the priority, and then the priority would be a little bit less expensive than the overnight shipping. And then we might want to add in some labels to include pricing. So when the user is about to select their shipping option, they need to have an idea about the price. So we'll get labels to include our prices. So let's have our standard shipping be 99 cents. We'll set our priority shipping to $1.99. And then the overnight shipping, we can set it to $3.99. And instead of using a label, we can also just add it to the text. So you have two options here. You can either choose to use labels. Let me go back. Or you can just add in the text within your radio button text. It's up to you. Whatever makes sense to you. Alright, so we don't need this label anymore. We also don't need this one. Okay, so these are our shipping options. We might want to move our group box a little bit up top and see how we can align it with the other one. Another thing that we can do is move our radio buttons to fit in our group box better. We can also add in another group box. So let's move this one down here. And our new group box would include other products that could be rented along with the game. So for this one, we will select accessories. And these are accessories that you might want to rent for games. So if you're renting a racing game, for example, you don't want to buy the racing wheel, you can just rent it with the game itself. So that would be our accessories group box. And in here we can have a few different options, but instead of using radio buttons, which imply that the user would select either one of these, we can use checkboxes. And checkboxes would allow the user to select different options at the same time. So let's try to do that. So for our first checkbox, we can have a controller, and then we'll call it the controller checkbox. We can add in a few more. We can have a headset, for example. We'll change the text to reflect what the checkbox is about. Then the last one, we'll set it to our racing wheel. All right, so now we have all of our controls in, and our form looks much better this way. We have our controls that are alike, that are grouped together, and we have a few options for the users to check from. And we are also avoiding the user to enter text or type in any text, which is one, very convenient, and two, minimizes user error. So now let's add in the code in the background, and we will modify this code to reflect the price of the overall price of the rental, depending on what the user selects as options. All right, so what we'll change in here is the checkout button, click method. So we had already created some code in the background. We will change it a little bit to reflect our new rules, or our new business rules. So remember here that we had a shipping cost variable that we had declared before. Now instead of using a set shipping cost, we will change the shipping costs depending on what the user selects. Okay, so we will look at our radio buttons. If our standard radio button is checked, and this is the code to do that. This is how we verify that the radio button is checked. We include the name of the radio button and we use the checked property. So if the standard radio button is checked, then our shipping costs will be $0.99. Else if the user does not select the standard but prefers the priority, we will set our shipping cost now to be $1.99. Our last option would be the overnight. So very similar code, we can copy and paste. We set the shipping cost now to be $3.99. So in here, our total price would be the daily price times the number of days. So this is the code that we had written previously. But now we need to add the shipping cost to our formula. Very simple. Whatever our shipping cost variable includes right now will be added to our total price. Now it is complaining about the shipping cost. Let's look at our error. It says use of unassigned variable, because here these are if statements, and the code is thinking, well, maybe these statements would not be executed, so we need a value for our shipping cost variable. So here, when we are declaring the variable, we can initialize it as well. So this is the declaration of the variable. Now we can also initialize the variable where we set it to 0. Now the code is not complaining anymore or the .NET framework is not complaining since we have a value for our shipping cost variable. Let's execute our code and see how it works. We will not select any accessories because we didn't write down the code for that part yet, but we will select a shipping option. So this is our total cost with the shipping option set to standard. Let's set it to priority. So now it's $1 more. And then if we set it to overnight, it's a few dollars more. All right. So now our shipping options are set. Let's fix the code for our accessories. So in here, very similar to what we did for the radio buttons, we will check if each checkbox has been selected. Going back to our form, we have the first checkbox called our controller checkbox. We will use the checked property. And in here, if the controller checkbox is set, then we need to add in a few dollars to that to the amount of rental. Now we can create a new variable for accessories. So we will call it accessories costs, and we will initialize that variable to 0 before we can use it. So we declare the variable and then we can initialize it. Another way to declare variables is to have the same variables being declared over here maybe up front if you know all of the variables that you're going to be using. And in here, since we are having a few variables that are all of the type double, we can declare all of them at the same time in the same statement. The way to do that is to use commas. So here we are declaring several variables. Then we can initialize our variables to 0 before we use them. So this would be our declaration statement, and these are our initialization statements. So here we have all of our variables that have been declared and are being initialized. And the compiler is complaining that this variable is not being used, which is true, and we will use it in a few seconds. So we're going to set accessories cost $2 for the controller. And then we'll copy and paste the same code to reflect the cost of renting a headset and a wheel. And we can change the prices of each accessory just to be able to test our code properly. So we'll make the cost of renting a headset be $3, and then the cost of renting the wheel set to $4. Let's go ahead and test. So we'll set our shipping option to standard, and then we will select a controller. Okay, so we have $349. If you do the math, then we're not accounting for the controller, and that is because we need to add in the accessories cost to our total formula. Let's try that again. All right, now it works. We can also select a headset and see here how we can select one or more accessories at a time. So we can take off the headset. We can only have controller and headset, etc. And we can play with these. So the difference between checkboxes and radio buttons is that with checkboxes you can select several options at the same time, whereas with radio buttons you can only select one option at a time. Alright, and that concludes our video for today. I hope that it's been helpful, and see you next time.